The plaintiffs are set to speak, and they are already right now speaking just outside the courthouse. This includes Dying with Dignity. And with me is our reporter, Katie DeRosa. She's listening right now, and we'll talk about this as soon as this press conference is over, but let's go to it right now.
It's also important to remember that respecting religious freedom in Canada means respecting the full diversity of beliefs held by individuals, including the beliefs and values of the patients themselves. It means ensuring that no one religion or religious doctrine is allowed to restrict or override access to legal medical care. In a publicly funded healthcare system, patient rights, dignity, and autonomy must come first, particularly at end of life when people are most vulnerable. Dying with Dignity Canada is supporting the O'Neill family because we believe that no one should lose access to end-of-life care based on where they happen to receive treatment. Every person deserves access to all of their end-of-life options without distress or forced transfer. This case is about putting patients first. It is about ensuring that compassion, dignity, and the law guide end-of-life care, not institutional barriers. Most importantly, it is about the real human impact of forced transfers on families who deserve better. With that, I'd like to invite Gay O'Neill to speak about her daughter Sam, their family's experience, and why this case matters. Gay's going to deliver her statement, but will not be taking any questions. Gay?
Good morning. Sam O'Neill died on April 4th, 2023, at St. John Hospice in Vancouver, British Columbia. She suffered a painful forced transfer from St. Paul's Hospital because the cancer she had been living with became intolerable, and she chose to die by medical assistance in dying rather than endure more suffering. The MAID procedure goes against Catholic teachings. St. Paul's is a Catholic-run hospital, but it is also publicly funded. There was no medical justification for the transfer. There was no specialized equipment. There was nothing special about the facility or room. And there was no specialized medical staff unique to St. John's Hospice. There was nothing at St. John that was not readily available in Sam's room at St. Paul's Hospital. Providence Healthcare simply does not allow MAID to be completed at St. Paul's. Providence Healthcare knew their policies and actions to transfer Sam on April 4th, 2023 would cause her harm and excruciating pain and humiliation, but they did it anyways. This disregard for Sam's safety is contrary to their legal obligation to take reasonable action to prevent harm. The government of British Columbia and the Vancouver Coastal Health aided Providence Healthcare's actions with a MAID policy that allows harm, and it pays for it with public tax dollars. We are here because we believe Sam's rights to freedom of religion and beliefs and her rights to life and liberty and security of person were violated. We are also here because we do not want to see anyone else suffer needlessly from another unjustified forced transfer. Sam, our 34-year-old daughter, was finally realizing her dreams. She said she had her dream job with Canada Running Series. She had a great family of friends through the East Van Run crew, and she ran her personal best time at the California International Marathon in December of 2021. She had an adorable Bernedoodle pup named Jack, and she had a beautiful godson in Ontario. Sam happily told her dad that she was enjoying her best life. It's all we wanted for our daughter, to be happy, to contribute to her community with love and purpose. Sam was a marathoner. She had 10 marathons under her belt, and she refused to ever accept a DNF, a did not finish. She always crossed the finish line. Sam was kind, and she practiced a hurt no one lifestyle, where she decided being vegan fit her lifestyle and values. She was fiercely independent. Everything came to her through hard work and determination. Shoot for the stars, and good things will happen. Well, not cervical cancer. On April 20th, 22, Sam was in pain, and eyes, blur, can't read. I'll start again. On April 20th, 22, Sam was in pain and went to St. Paul's Hospital, which was less than a kilometer away from her apartment. There she learned she had a tumor, and cervical cancer was suspected. A few days later, she was back at St. Paul's, unable to urinate. She was admitted and received surgery to install nephrostomy bags because a large tumor blocked her ureters. Sam was transferred to BC Cancer for a number of appointments, but there was no available room there, so she was returned to St. Paul's. The staff there, for the most part, were exceptional, according to Sam. It made sense for her to continue her care in the closest hospital with the staff she knew and trusted. Sam continued to work from home while dealing with her worsening cancer. She sadly had to find a new home for her dog Jack, and she could no longer take care of him. She was also evicted from her apartment because the owner claimed he was going to use the apartment and move in. He didn't. Sam was very fortunate and very grateful for the support of her cousin Taryn and her many friends, especially Megan, Katie, and Rose. They helped her rehome her dog, find and move her into another apartment, and managed her many health care and basic needs. Sam's cancer continued to advance. She was admitted to St. Paul's again in late January of 2023 and discharged in late February. While in hospital, Sam was assessed for MAID, not because she wanted to die, but because she wanted an option to control her life. On March 12, 2023, our daughter was in distress again and called for an ambulance. Approximately 7 hours later, the ambulance finally arrived to take her to Emerge. The dispatcher chose St. Paul's because it was the closest available emergency room. She had no choice regarding which hospital she went to. There were discussions about moving her to another facility that allowed MAID, but Sam said no. She did not want to lose the continuity of care from the St. Paul's palliative care team. To be asked to choose from let us hurt you now or let us hurt you later when you might want MAID is offensive. It is far from a compassionate and patient-centered request. On April 2nd and 3rd, Sam underwent 2 separate procedures to address 2 different cancer-related issues. The doctors witnessed and noted that the moves within the halls of St. Paul's caused Sam to cry out in excruciating pain. On the morning of April 4th, 2023, Sam requested MAID. The palliative care team engaged with Sam, discussed the process, and soon confirmed that the Vancouver Coastal Health doctor would be available at 8:30 that evening at St. John Hospice. How chaotic was the day? Well, it started off a little shocking because we weren't prepared to lose Sam. Sam had been experiencing extremely painful spasms throughout the day. By mid-afternoon, Sam's family and friends were at the hospital waiting to see her. We had very short visits, squeezed in right between regular pain crisis moments. At times, our daughter was mentally aware, and she was emailing goodbyes to some of her friends. Everything roller coasted quickly. At some point around 6 p.m. or shortly thereafter, a nurse came to tell us we could quickly say our final goodbyes to Sam before she was prepared for the transfer vehicle. We were told we would have to go in groups of 5, 2 groups of 5. At that point, Sam was sitting on a commode in the middle of a room with a sheet wrapped around her. I was absolutely horrified. I was shocked and appalled by the indignity of what we were witnessing. I stifled my horror, and I told Sam quickly that being her mom was the first, most joyful part of my life. I love being her mom. I told her how proud I was, and I told her how proud I was of who she became, and how sorry I was that this had snowballed so quickly. Sam said it is what it is. She had resigned herself to the situation. I told her I loved her, and she told me she loved me, and I kissed her gently on the forehead, and we were asked to leave the room so the nurses could prep her. We waited in the hall with a crowd of friends, family, and medical personnel, tears in the eyes of absolutely everyone. Eventually, her care team brought her daughter out on a gurney. There is nothing that could have prepared our hearts for what was happening. By then, Sam was heavily sedated, so there was no more communication. She was rolled down the long hallway to the elevators to take her down the 10 floors, then down another long hallway, out the back of the hospital, across the parking lot to the transfer vehicle. The IV pole didn't collapse to fit into the transfer vehicle. It had to be held on an angle by my husband, who traveled with her, and a nurse to St. John Hospice. Our heavily sedated daughter moaned and writhed in pain with each bump on the approximately 25-minute drive was administered more pain meds to control the pain. It is crushing to know that Sam's last memory on this earth was that of extreme pain caused by the transfer. Yep. Upon arriving at the hospice, it was obvious the multi-use room Sam was going to had been used by Providence to store excess equipment, which was now in the hallway blocking the path to the room. I quickly jumped in and moved the equipment further down the hall to clear the path. It was shocking and disrespectful. The VCH doctor providing MAID did not work at St. John's Hospice. He arrived by motorcycle with the necessary medications. He was very compassionate, and we appreciated his gentle manner. It was obvious he could have traveled to St. Paul's had he been allowed. No one should ever be treated as Sam was on that day. The government of British Columbia supports Providence's actions with a MAID policy that allows harm, and the public pays for it. The hypocrisy of a forced transfer is outrageous. Our Sam was going to die. She knew that. There was no cure, and she was suffering terribly, living with a disease that had robbed her of her quality of life. We miss our daughter every minute of every day. We absolutely respect her wish to put an end to her own suffering and take control of her destiny and die with the dignity she deserved. Sam didn't want the cancer to win. MAID could have helped her accomplish that last piece of control in her life. That tiny piece of control was squashed by the disrespect of her beliefs by Providence Healthcare and the government of BC. Their actions were cruel. The assumption and attitude that Sam's beliefs, or the beliefs of anyone seeking reasonable access to MAID or medical assistance in dying, are inferior and unequal beliefs, results in harm. This attitude of Providence Healthcare and the government of BC has no place in Canada. Forced transfers must be stopped. Thank you.
Happy to take a few questions if anyone has any.
What's the goal of this constitutional challenge? What's the outcome of it?
Yeah, the goal would be that it is found that buildings do not have charter rights to conscience objections, and that the government forces publicly funded healthcare facilities to allow MAID to be provided on site, not by the clinicians working in those religious institutions, but by clinicians who are available and willing to do so.
What are you expecting in terms of defense from Providence and the other side?
Yeah, I can't really comment on that. I'm sorry. Anything else?
Will you speaking besides gay?
Testifying besides gay, I will be testifying. We have a number of experts testifying, researchers, clinicians. Dr. Jyothi Jarman, who is one of the plaintiffs in the case, will be speaking. There's a fairly long list. We can provide that to you.
If this decision is made that the province is found if they cannot allow this to continue, what kind of implications could this have across?
Yeah, I mean, that is our goal, obviously, and that means that across Canada we will see change of this kind. We already see this change in Quebec, where they have opted to move ahead without being forced to do so. But we would anticipate that this will spread across Canada and will result in access not only for MAID, but for other healthcare practices that are perhaps forbidden by institutional objections. We're here for 4 weeks, back for a week mid-April for closing arguments, and then a decision we would hope by late summer, early fall. Okay. Thank you all for coming, particularly given the weather. We really appreciate it.
Thanks.
And you are just hearing from some of the plaintiffs. There was Helen Long there from Dying with Dignity, and as well as Gay O'Neill. She's among the plaintiffs of a charter challenge today. The issue is whether publicly funded hospitals and healthcare facilities can refuse patients seeking medical assistance in dying on religious grounds, and that was just happening right outside the courthouse here in downtown Vancouver. For more on what we heard, let's bring in our reporter Katie DeRosa in Victoria. She was listening to the whole press conference with me. Now, Katie originally broke the story of Sam O'Neill. So, Katie, listening to that, you've heard some of those stories before. A very passionate plea from Gay O'Neill. What was your takeaway today? It was very difficult to listen to.
Yeah, clearly very, very emotional as Gay recounted the last hours of her daughter's life. She says she was stripped of her dignity, and that is why they are bringing this case to court. So we will expect to hear from Gay O'Neill on the stand during this 4-week trial. And basically, again, the crux, as she pointed out, and as Dying with Dignity is pointing out, is these hospitals, Providence Health and its various hospice facilities, long-term care facilities are funded by the province, even though they are run by Catholic health organizations. And so they receive public money, but they are not providing certain services like MAID. And as Dying with Dignity pointed out, this practice occurs in Ontario and other provinces other than Quebec. So this case, if Dying with Dignity is successful, could set a precedent not just in BC, but across Canada.
And Katie, do we know how often these forced transfers that we heard Gay and we heard Helen talk about, how often is this happening in BC? How much of an issue is it?
Yeah, well, last time I reported the story, I talked to Dr. Jyoti Gemma Ryan. She will be one of the plaintiffs. She is a palliative care doctor who quit Providence Health over their failure to provide MAID, and she says that she witnessed this happening, dozens of times in a year, and so she says that it is happening quite frequently. I believe Providence Health, their 2023 stats were about 20 cases that they reported in that year. But what Gay O'Neill and Dying with Dignity are pointing out is that it shouldn't happen at all. Now, after Sam's case, the province did make changes at St. Paul's to have sort of an adjacent building that is run by Vancouver Coastal Health. So they're saying that they have fixed the issue, but Gay's parents say that even if it's an adjacent building at St. Paul's, it still constitutes a transfer, and it's still stigmatizing the issue of medical assistance in dying. So they say that fix is not good enough.
I can see their point. Though, what is the perspective, though, however, from the defendant's side of this case? Because this is indeed a charter challenge. We're talking about religious rights coming up against this other policy that we're seeing. What do we expect to hear from the defendants in this case?
Well, the defendants, intend to put forward that, the Archbishop of British Columbia, of the Catholic Church, sets the policies for these Catholic-run institutions, and that medical assistance in dying is against Catholic doctrine, and that they have the right to conscientious objection to provide that as a service. And so I'm sure they will point to, options that were provided by the province, but what it comes down to is religious freedom and whether those Catholic-run health organizations have the ability to not provide that. But what Gay's parents said is that, we're talking about a building. We're not talking about individual doctors. They don't want to force doctors to go against their conscientious objection, but if a medical assistance in dying palliative care doctor is able to go into say St. Paul's, that the building doesn't have conscientious objection. So I feel like that is going to be a big argument here as to who is objecting to the care. Is it the institution or the individual doctors?
And Katie, lastly, of course, you are our legislative bureau chief. You've been covering this story for now years. Just the back and forth with Victoria, what have we heard from the health ministry about this case?
Well, again, the last time actually I spoke to, it was health minister, was Adrian Dix at the time, and he again pointed to the fixes that they made, that they say they made at St. Paul's Hospital with this adjacent building. But I did ask about hospice facilities that are run by Providence Health and whether they would, also force that person to transfer. What Minister Dix said at the time as health minister was that many people opt for medical assistance in dying at home, and he says it's rare that they would do that in the hospice facility. So he was trying to point out, how rare this is, and that, it is a small number of cases where people are transferred. But again, as the family had said, they don't want this to happen to anyone. And certainly after I reported this story, there were other family members who came out and said their loved one was also forced to transfer. So it's happening, and this court case will decide whether or not it continues to happen.
Okay, we will see the repercussions of it. This court case expected to last 4 weeks, and then eventually we'll see as it heads probably likely to the Supreme Court of Canada. Thank you so much for your reporting, as always, our Katie DeRosa in Victoria. Now to other news, an evacuation alert is in effect for a number of properties near the Chilliwack River. The Fraser Valley Regional District says there's potential danger to life and safety because of high river flows with the heavy rain. The alert includes all lands between Allison Pool and Chilliwack Lake near the river or within its floodplain. Rainfall warnings are in effect for many parts of the south coast. Yesterday, the River Forecast Centre expanded its flood watch advisories to cover all of Vancouver Island. And Premier David Eby and BC Jobs Minister Ravi Kahlon are beginning their 6-day trade mission to India. They will visit what's known as India's Silicon Valley. They're looking for customers for BC's softwood lumber, critical minerals, and natural gas. It's a trip that's garnered mixed reactions, some saying it's a mistake, others saying it is long overdue.
We are lagging far behind. We have lost a lot of time. We have lost a lot of exports and trade and bilateral trade. Both the countries need each other actually today. And that's how it is, and that's how we are going forward. And I'm glad that Premier David Eby has taken this initiative and he's going forward.
Now, some in the Sikh community, however, accuse Eby of choosing business over blood. As they say, no one has been brought to justice over India's ties to the killing of prominent Sikh Hardeep Singh Nijjar outside of a Gurdwara in Surrey. Eby says that matter is between the federal government and the government of India, and that his goal is to diversify BC's trade away from the U.S. And police in Surrey are investigating another extortion-related shooting. For the second time in a matter of weeks, a house in Cloverdale has been hit by gunfire. The first incident happened on New Year's Eve when someone opened fire on a property on 54th Avenue near 187th Street. Then, early yesterday morning, the same home was targeted again. No one was injured, though. In either incident, police are investigating. And later this month, a major stretch of Vancouver's Broadway corridor will be closed for 4 months as part of the ongoing subway construction. During that time, traffic will be detoured a block over onto East 8th Avenue. And that has nearby businesses worried that with all the vehicles and buses rerouted onto that side street, there are not enough crosswalks or drop-off zones in the new plan.
If you don't have money coming in, you can't pay employees. So we're looking at economic factors, we're looking at job loss, potentially, and we're looking at the character of a neighbourhood that they're building for won't be here.
East Broadway between Main and Quebec streets will be closed to traffic starting January 26. Well, national rent